Now, down to business. The candidates will each answer every question, but they've just drawn lots to determine the order of batting. So the first question will go first to the person who drew lot number 1, in this case, Jeremy Corbyn. And then the next question will go first to Liz Kendall. The next question will go first to Yvette Cooper. And the final question, the next question after that will go first to Andy Burnham. So, and so on and so on and so on. If this sounds confusing, just be thankful you're not me. Thank you very much for the questions you have all submitted in advance. There were far too many, I'm afraid, to ask them all, so I've selected some that we hope will cover the widest range of subjects that seem to be important to you. We're hoping to have time for about 9 questions, but we'll only get through that many if you help. So with each question, I'm going to read out the name of the person who submitted it and ask you to stand up, say who you are, and read out your own question. You should have kept the stub that gives you it. You've got 30 seconds for the question, so don't add any twiddly bits. This is not the time for your speech. Every candidate then has 1 minute to answer. This sounds a bit killjoy, but I am under firm instructions to ask you not to clap, boo, hiss, etc. after any of the answers, as apparently it wastes a surprising amount of time. So, yes, if you feel strongly, you just have to fidget violently or something. But the rules for both candidates and audience are the same. No heckling, interrupting, or general uncomradely behaviour. Everyone gets heard with respect. I'm not going to be playing Paxman, but if I feel that any candidates are avoiding the question flat out, I will intervene on your behalf to make sure it gets answered. At the close of the event, each candidate gets 2 minutes to sum up why they think they're best person for the job. So if all that's clear, the first question comes from Liz Walker from South East Cambridgeshire, CLP, who may or may not have already walked out and discussed. If you're here, Liz Walker, hey, well done, thank you very much. I'm going to move over here.
I'm a secretary of a local branch in South East Cambs, CLP. Is 29 too old for my daughter and her husband to be still living at home because buying a home is so expensive?
Jeremy.
Yes, it is far too old for them to be living at home and unable to be living independently. The housing crisis in Britain is a national disgrace. In my own constituency, the private rented sector now occupies 30% of the residents. The council accommodation about 40%, and then there's a declining owner occupation level. We're ahead of the curve in the sense of the trend that's happening all over the country, where fewer and fewer people can afford to buy their own place and can't afford to rent or get security in the private rented sector. We need to do a number of things to deal with the housing crisis in Britain. 1, build urgently a lot more council housing. 2, regulate the private rented sector, including rent levels, particularly in the big city areas. 3, provide state subsidised mortgages, local authority subsidised mortgages if necessary, in order to help people to buy, in order to reduce the pressure on the other sectors. But I'm not in favour of the sale of council housing in areas of high housing stress. I'm absolutely not in favour of the sale of housing association property, because we need that property to deal with people in desperate need in the future.
Thank you very much. And Liz.
Yes, she is too old, and she's there are many people like her. 1 in 4 people between 20 and 34 are still living at home with their parents. And I think that there's 5 things that we need to do to tackle the housing shortage. We're only building about 115,000 homes a year, and we need 250,000. So we need to make more land available and make sure it's developed more quickly. We need to get the investment in to build more homes and to put the infrastructure in place, the transports and schools and so on. We need different types of homes, social and affordable housing, also shared ownership and homes for older people, as we all live for longer. We've barely touched on that issue. We also need, I think, to give communities a much stronger say in where, when and what type of housing there is. And we've got to get much more competition amongst the types of builders that there are. You know, it's still very dominated by large companies who want to make big, big profits from large homes. We need to get more small and medium-sized builders into that. That is how we'll tackle the problem.
Thanks very much. And Yvette?
Yes, definitely too old to be living at home. And it just shows as well, this is about widening inequality that's happening now, because now your chances of buying your own home really depend on whether or not you can draw on the bank of mum and dad, or if you've got grandparents who owned their own home and you maybe get that extra help. We want everybody to be able to have the chance, if they're working hard, to be able to own their own home, In order to do that, we should also be looking at more affordable housing, more council housing, more housing association homes, action on the private rented sector, and help for first-time buyers to get that first step on the ladder. But none of this is going to work unless we build so much more homes. And I would go further than Liz, because I don't think 250,000 homes is enough. When Labour was in government, we managed to get it up to nearly 200,000 homes before the financial crash that we were building a year. But it's just not enough. We've had generations of not building enough homes. We should be trying to build 300,000 homes a year. We should be far more ambitious. That's what we did after the war. It's what Labour governments have done in the past. We can do it again, but we've got to have that strong vision of the future if we're going to deliver.
Thank you. And Andy?
I think I'll stand so everybody can hear. It's far too old, but it's actually worse than what you're saying, because if you can't fall back on mum and dad, the average age of somebody, a first-time buyer, who can't fall on parental support is 37. So it's actually even worse for many people, and they can't see a route to home ownership. I'll tell you what's the wrong thing to do, what the Tories are proposing. You know, the right to buy for housing associations. It'll make the problem even worse because they won't build the extra homes that we need. So what's the Labour answer to this? Yes to building more homes. Yes to changes in the private rented sector. But I'm going to set out a policy next week called Rent to Buy, which means that everybody, the dream of home ownership should be alive for everybody in this country. And that's the question we've got to answer. What is Labour for going forward? It should be about helping everybody get on in life, rather than a few, lucky few escaping and everyone else struggling. That's what this party should be about, and that's what we've got to get back in the business of if we're going to win again in 2020.
Thanks very much. And next question comes from Ian Cooper from Bedford. Are you with us, Ian Cooper? Well done, thank you. A mic is heading your way, sir.
Thank you. My name's Ian Cooper. I'm from Bedford. I'm a teacher. I've seen class sizes rising and rising. Is funding to reduce class sizes the best way to increase educational standards?
Thank you very much. And that question first to Liz.
We need to improve investment in our schools, and we've got to start even earlier, in my view. We need to make the very earliest years of life, 0 to 5 years, as much a priority as primary and secondary schools. I'm sure you'll see this in Bedford, but there are many kids starting school way behind where they should be in terms of their development. In my constituency, they start 15 months behind where they should be, and they then play catch up for the rest of their lives. We've got to tackle class sizes. We've also got to back great heads and great teachers and really change the curriculum. I think the Tories are taking us back to the 19th century with what they're doing in our schools. We want kids not to just survive in the modern world, but to thrive. We've got to make sure academic and vocational qualifications have equal status and build the character and confidence kids need to get on when they leave school. You know, as a Labour Party, if we're not talking about giving kids a great education and the best start in life, we have forgotten what we're about.
Thanks very much, Yvette.
We're going to be bobbing up and down with different patterns now. I think about the education I want for my kids. I want the best quality education, but that does mean I do worry if they're getting stuck in class sizes that just get too big and the attention that they'll get. But of course, it's not the only thing. I would rather put the money into investing in lower class sizes than into new free schools, because I think that is a waste of money. It's bad value for money, and we've got to get the best possible education for our children. But I think one of the bigger things we've got to do is get rid of this artificial divide that we have had far too long between academic and vocational education, particularly as our teenagers grow. For too long, we've had the kind of snobbery in Britain, which means that vocational education has been seen as second class, yet we actually need really good, high-quality vocational education for the high-tech jobs that we need for the future. I think that is the way to have a vision in which all our kids can get on.
Thank you very much. And Andy?
Yes, we've got to bring class sizes down, but the way to do it is not to, as some have argued, support the government's free school programme. As Shadow Education Secretary, I took the fight for that immediately. How can it be right to be spending money in places where there are already surplus places, and we're taking money away from constituencies where kids are in falling down buildings in classes over 30? That just cannot be right. This whole programme under this government is an experiment with people's education, with kids' education, and I stand against that. I believe in comprehensive education with every fibre of my being as a product of it. All kids educated together, all backgrounds together. That's what we should be about in this party. But the way to make it modern and relevant for the 21st century is to make sure every kid in school has hope that there is something waiting for them at the end of school, a guaranteed university or an apprenticeship place. That is comprehensive education for the 21st century. That is what I believe in, and that is what I will stand for as leader of the Labour Party.
Thank you. And Jeremy.
Obviously, class sizes must be reduced, must be controlled, and there's enormous pressure put on schools to extend a class 31, 32, 33. You know how it goes during the year. Therefore, that means rapid investment to do it. There is a problem for schools where families move, and therefore children arrive in a community unexpectedly during the academic year. They've got to be educated somewhere, so you then end up with double-year classes, which is not very satisfactory for anybody. So clearly that has to be dealt with. Secondly, we have to reassert the value of the role of local government in the administration of our education system. This over-centralisation to the Department of Education is a recipe for failure and a recipe for chaos in the future. And we need to ensure that the academies and the free schools are brought within the family of local authority education and local authority schools. It's good for the schools, good for the kids. They only have one educational opportunity. The last point I make in the 5 seconds I've got is quite simply this. Defend the principles we've always stood for of adult education, education for life, and an opportunity to learn whatever you want to do throughout your life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. No clapping, please. Sorry, I'm going to sound like a total fascist. Can we have Debbie, can't quite reach your surname, from Baldock in Hertfordshire? Might be Wicks? Might be Hicks? I think she's over here.
Okay, I'm sorry, another teacher here, I'm afraid, today. What I've found in my course of teaching is the level of Islamophobia that's increasing in the classroom is incredibly worrying. What I'd like to ask you as candidates, if elected, what will you work to do to fight the growing tide of Islamophobia in the UK?
Thank you. And that question first to Yvette.
You're right, and I've already had meetings with different Muslim groups, different community organisations about how we challenge Islamophobia. I've also had meetings with groups on how we challenge rising anti-Semitism, how we challenge other kinds of hate crimes, because we are seeing, I think, growing hatred, growing division in too many communities across the country, and too many people exploiting those divisions as well. We in the Labour Party have always stood up against hate crimes. We strengthened the law against hate crimes, and we need to do everything we can to prevent that. And that does mean also challenging those who want to push extreme views, whether from the far right, whether from Islamist extremists, because that also causes problems for Muslim communities and the Islamophobia that they need to stand up against. And I had talked to a girl in Cardiff who said that she was worried to go out on the day of the football matches because of the level of Islamophobia and the prejudice that she got against us. We have to always stand against that. That is what the Labour Party is. That is what our values are, based on core human rights as well.
Thank you. And Andy.
I think this is one of the most serious issues facing us as a society right now. It's the frontier now that the far right are using to further their appalling aims, and we've got to wake up to that. I tell you what I would not do as leader of your party. I would not do what David Cameron has just done, which is imply that the Muslim community are to blame for young people going to Syria because they are tolerating extremism within their community. I would never do that. Do you know what I would do? I would support those community leaders in places like Bradford, in places like Bolton, who are working hard to tackle extremism. I would give them all the support I possibly could, because we have to build that strong consensus, fighting extremism together. That is the only way to do it. I did that as a Home Office Minister responsible for integration. That is what I believe in, and that is the best way to tackle the appalling Islamophobia that we're seeing running rife through many communities.
Thank you very much. Jeremy.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I represent a very mixed constituency, as do my colleagues here. There are 5 mosques in my constituency. I visit all of them regularly. I speak at Friday prayers, and I hold advice bureaus in 2 of them, as I do in other places of worship. I think we have to understand the very important role the mosque plays in the community, particularly in supporting refugees and people who are very much up against it. They are part of the social fabric, particularly of inner city Britain. The Islamophobia that is promoted day in, day out on loose comments, nasty comments, unfortunate newspaper headlines, plays out very badly. Young Muslims worked hard, studied, achieved at school and university, suddenly find unemployed, unemployable, routinely stopped and searched by the police because they are a woman wearing a headgear or a man wearing something that's not seen as normal dress. That is wrong in our society, and we as a party have got to absolutely stand up against any kind of discrimination or racism. And also, I'm not happy with the prevent agenda. I think we should be trying to prevent racism, far-right extremism, any kind of intolerance, be it Islamophobia or anti-Semitism at the same time.
Debbie, I represent Leicester West, a very diverse constituency, and I've seen for myself and experienced the hate that's been brought to our city by people like the English Defence League, and the appalling violence that's resulted, and how they've tried to divide our city. But we believe in Leicester in one Leicester, and we work very hard to show what the different faiths and communities have in common. We believe in the Labour Party in solidarity, that we have more that unites us than divides us. We work very hard in our schools to make sure, as they're growing up, kids understand the excitement of different beliefs and faiths, but also what they have in common. And we need, I think, to do more to reach out to the younger generation within our mosques, not just work through the elders. That's really important for the future. And ultimately, on the prevent strategy, the Tories have made this simply, I believe, about the police and terrorism. It should be genuinely about prevention, working with those communities and involving schools. That is the only way we're going to have a long-term solution to the hatred that's being proposed.
And the next question comes from Marie Ferguson-Smith from Cambridge, if you are with us. The microphone should be finding its way to you.
In view of the recent election results and the lack of response to coalition's accusations that Labour caused the economic crisis of 2008, how would you argue the case that it was not all Labour's fault?
Thank you. And that question first to Andy.
Well, I think you're putting your finger on the big failing of the last Parliament, aren't you? While we were in the last leadership election, the Tories were hanging that millstone around our neck that it was Labour's mess, and we didn't ever get after them and correct the record. How would I do it? We ran a strong economy for 10 years, from 1997 to 2007. I would point that out first. The second thing I would point out, Labour ran more surpluses in our first term than the Tories ran in 18 years. Remember that. The third thing I would point out, we did fix the roof while the sun was shining. The roofs of the schools, the hospitals, where water was pouring through when we came to government in 1997. And you know, I was the last Chief Secretary that did the last spending review in the last Labour government, the last one to do a spending review. And that review that I did, Cameron and Osborne called it tough. They said it was a tough spending review. They changed their tune when everything then collapsed in the United States in a worldwide crash. We have got a lot to be proud of. It's time in this party we stop beating ourselves up. Let's be proud of what we did when we were in government. Let's be proud of who we are and what we did to invest in this country and put it back on its feet.
Thank you. Jeremy.
The Labour government certainly did not spend too much, and actually it spent even less than previous governments. And I think we should be clear about that. We made a big mistake in allowing this fact to get out there that somehow or other we spent too much, and the way that has played out in the media. This is then translated into somehow or other saying the absolute priority is getting a budget surplus within 3 years, 5 years, or whatever the particular time frame is set at. No, I think the priority is to gain full employment of real jobs, proper wages, not 0 hours contracts. It is to develop innovative industries, it's to develop green industries, develop high-tech industries. It's to invest in the economy in a process of partnership. And above all, the priority of a Labour government should be to reduce and remove the ghastly inequality that exists within our society. Why do the top 100 families own the equivalent of 30% of the wealth of the entire population? Set ourselves the task of eliminating poverty and inequality in Britain by investing in public services, investing in growth industries, investing in a sustainable economy. That seems to me a much better way forward than accepting the narrative of austerity. That's why I'll be on the march this afternoon.
And Liz. Well, the way we deal with this is we tell the truth. The crash wasn't created in Downing Street, it was created on Wall Street. And it was global. That's why countries across the world have faced an economic crisis. And we need to explain that if we hadn't put the money into the banks, all of us, our money would have been at risk, and the risk of businesses. And there would have been a depression and not a recession. The truth is, though, we will beat the Tories when we focus on the future and the future of the economy and how it needs to change. And the Tories are repeating the mistakes of the past. Half of the growth we've seen over the last Parliament was in London and the South East, when we need it across the country. Our levels of skills are way behind many other countries. People are going back into personal debt, and we're being driven by consumerism and the service sector. We need a radical change in our economy to make sure there are jobs and growth in every part of the country and that people have the skills and opportunities they need to get it. We will win when we face the future, not simply put right the mistakes of the past.
Time, please. And Yvette.
Yeah, the financial crisis caused the deficit, not the other way round. And of course that means the debt and deficit have to come down now, but let's be clear about what the causes really were. And there's also a bit of a myth going round, which some people have signed up to, which was that somehow Labour's public spending made it harder to deal with the crisis when it happened. Actually, Labour had paid down a lot of debt. Labour had run more surpluses 4 times as frequently as Tory governments in the past. We'd paid down debt. That meant we could run the Future Jobs Fund, we could cut VAT, we could stop banks from crashing, taking all of our savings with it. And we have to challenge that. But we also have to be really clear right across the country, no matter how many times they say it. It was not too many teachers, too many doctors, too many nurses that caused Lehman Brothers Bank in New York to crash. That is rubbish, and we should call it out every single time.
Thank you very much. Next question. No clapping. Let's get it. Selina Norgrove from Broxbourne. Can you stand up, please? Selina Norgrove. Well done. Everybody's teachers. Anyone would think it's a Labour Party or something. There's a mic coming.
I didn't get the name.
What makes you stand out and what make your ideas different?
And it's Jeremy to answer that first.
Well, I was never a great adherent to New Labour. I'll let you know that secretly. Secretly within this audience here today. I entered this contest at the behest of others because I wanted the opportunity to have the discussion, to have the debate, and party members to have a chance to discuss the economic, social, international direction this party takes. I think we've swallowed the austerity argument for too long. We've swallowed the neoliberal economic argument for too long, and we made a fundamental mistake in the election of promising that we would balance within 5 years and we would continue what would have been quite serious cuts, particularly in local government expenditure, which would have a massive effect on adult social care. I think we need to think very carefully about the economic direction in which we go. The other area, and I'll say this very quickly, is I hold a different view to the many in the party on international affairs. I am passionately opposed to nuclear weapons and the holding of them, and would certainly not support the replacement of Trident. Likewise, I was against the interventionist wars that have taken place. I think we need a different international direction.
Liz. I think I offer a clean break without the baggage of the past, but I think I offer far more than that. I think I will say things that aren't always comfortable to party members, but I'll say them because I think they're right. And some people have said, I've swallowed the Tory manifesto whole, and that's simply not true. I believe in strong public finances because we shouldn't be spending more on servicing our debt than educating our kids. And I champion businesses and wealth creation because without that, we won't be able to get the investment in the public services we need. And those are our values, and I believe they are the country's values. People didn't trust us with the economy or with their taxes, and too many people think we don't stand for work, opportunity, and responsibility. We have faced a huge defeat. We need big change to win again, and I think that's what I've got to offer.
Thank you. And Yvette.
I want us to reach out right across the whole country. We've got to win back votes from the Tories, from UKIP, the SNP. My family come from the north. I went to comprehensive in the south. I want us to reach out to every part of the country. Second thing is, I know this is a really tough job. We're going to have somebody who is strong enough to take on the Tories, which frankly I would enjoy, and to hold them to account, and also to be strong enough to not only change our party so that we can win, but also to be a Labour Prime Minister for the future. And the final thing is, I think this job is going to need experience because it's hard. I've run multi-billion-pound departments, I've had different ministerial jobs, but I've also got the ideas for the future about how we get the high-tech jobs of the future, how we get the childcare revolution so that families aren't being stretched in all different directions, and how we are true to our Labour values. Don't just ditch them, don't just switch and say the Tories won, so therefore they must be right. Let's be proud of our values, but let's make sure they are applied to the modern world, to 2020 and beyond.
Thank you. And Andy.
The change I can offer you is the change that Labour most needs to make, and that is to come out of the Westminster bubble and reconnect with those millions of people that we have lost, be a party and people they can relate to. You know, I've always been true to my roots rather than part of the Westminster elite, and that was tested in 2009 when I went to Anfield as the government minister on the 20th anniversary of the Hillsborough disaster. Now, that was a city that we had not listened to, our own city. They'd been crying injustice for 20 years and we just weren't listening. And I had to choose, who did I stand up for, that Westminster elite or the people who put me where I am? I put them first and I took on the establishment. And that is the kind of person I am. That is the kind of person that you would be electing as leader of the Labour Party. That is the values that has always driven me. And that is what this party needs to do if we are to move from where we are now to where we need to be. A party people can relate to, that speaks their language. And that is what I will offer you.
Thank you very much. And do we have Timothy Sykes from Cambridge with us? Timothy, well done. Can you stand up? The microphone will be heading your way. Or you can shout. Thank you.
Given that the government is proposing further cuts to the welfare budget, would you support cuts to access to work, personal independence payments and other benefits disabled people depend on?
Thank you. And that's to Liz first.
I know from my work in care and support that disabled people have been hit from all sides, on the benefit side, but also on the care and support that they get. People aren't getting the basic help they need to get up, washed, dressed, fed, and out of bed. They're seeing their support to get back into work cut. They're seeing the support they need to get skills cut. And that is awful for disabled people, but it costs us all far more. Because if people can't get the skills they need to work, and if they're not getting the decent support they need to stay well at home, it ends up costing us all more. But we do need to reform welfare to help people who can work get into work, and to help people who can't have a decent standard of life. And that is not happening under the Tories. Look at housing benefit. Over the last Parliament, the government spent 95% of its money on housing benefit, not homes. We're spending more on tax credits because people are on low pay. We have to change that round, and we need big reform. We can't stay as we are.
Thank you. And Yvette, please.
Yeah, we all know the best way to save money on welfare is to help people into work, not push people into poverty. That's what we should be doing. There was a lot of work that's been done but so much more needs to be done to help people who have disabilities in order to work. Yet what we saw is this government just closed the Remploy programmes and didn't help a lot of those people who were in work get new jobs to replace them. That's what I think needs to be the priority. I've always supported things like the Future Jobs Fund, which are about providing jobs and support for people so that you could get young people into work, so that you could get people with disabilities into work. That's the principle we should follow. But I would say this, I've always believed in that strong sense of responsibility to work. But having been 20 years ago myself too ill to work for about 12 months, and I hated every single minute of it. I was desperate to get back to work. And yet I had to claim benefits because it was the only way to pay the rent. And so I will never say that people who cannot work are work shy or benefit scroungers. We should have the right principles of both responsibility and respect in the system that we have.
Thank you. Andy.
Labour, the party of work, that's what we've got to be if we're going to win again. And one of the hard truths we do have to face up to is we cannot give out a message that we're comfortable with people earning more in benefits than other people do in wages. As hard as that is, we have got to face up to that. But we don't copy the Tories. We want Labour solutions. And what are the Labour solutions to bringing down the benefits bill? More homes, more secure jobs. One of the best things in our manifesto was the tax incentives for employers to pay the living wage. That is a Labour solution to bringing down the benefits bill. But this is what I won't sign up to. A campaign that is now underway to demonise people on benefits. That's what the Tories are doing. The benefits cap arises because of problems with housing, the cost of housing in London, but they are using it to claim that everybody's milking the system and that everybody is on the make. You know, we will and must never sign up to a campaign where vulnerable people who can't replace that income from any other source through work are then having that money taken off them. And this is a red line for me. We never sign up to those cuts to disability benefits. Why? Because if we're not a voice for the voiceless and the vulnerable, then we are nothing in this Labour Party, and I will always be that on your behalf.
Thank you. Jeremy.
The disability benefit cuts are horrendous, appalling, dreadful in every way. The loss of the Independent Living Fund, the way in which those with disabilities and those with mental health conditions are expected to go through an interview, be forced to return to work, lose their benefit because they can't find a job, and eventually win an appeal. There have been suicides as a result of that, and the way in which people with disabilities have been treated is absolutely disgusting and disgraceful, and we should be ashamed of it as a country, never mind anything else. The attack on benefits and the welfare system, I think we're probably all agreed on this. As a party, we founded the welfare state in 1948 because we believed in the principle that nobody should be destitute in our society, just as much as we believe everybody should have access to health care as a right. Stand for that principle. Don't allow the nastiness of Benefit Street to take over. Don't allow them to argue us into supporting the reduction in the benefit cap when we know full well that benefit cap is going to damage the lifestyles and life chances of a lot of people in the most expensive parts of Britain who rely on benefits to survive.
Thank you very much. And for the next question, can we have, I think it's Sam Pullen, St Albans. I'm sorry if I can't quite read your writing. Sam, somebody from St Albans. Fantastic.
What was his name? Sam.
Thank you.
So I'd like to claim I'm not a teacher, but that would be a lie. With Scotland seemingly moving left and England right, how will you formulate policy which can appeal to both without being anodyne and middle of the road?
Thank you very much, Yvette. Your first question.
I think what's happened in Scotland is complicated and hard for us, and what I think is part of what's happened, we've obviously had the aftermath of the referendum and the shadow of the referendum, but also when you have a long period of falling living standards, it's then fertile ground for nationalism. We've seen that in Scotland and in England. So one of the things we have to argue for in Scotland is the basic principles of solidarity that the Labour movement has always believed in, which is we should care just as much about children growing up in poverty in Lanarkshire as in Leeds, about people who are being exploited in the workplace in Aberdeen or in Bethnal Green, that we should maintain those principles, but also then have stronger devolution so that you have more decisions being made in Scotland about the things that people care about most in Scotland, and not just within England, but to different parts of England, different regions, different cities, different towns and different communities in England as well. So I think that it is possible for us to maintain our support for our strong universal values, but also have greater devolution so that different parts of the country can champion the things that they care about most. In the end, we're still stronger together than we are if we leave people to sink or swim alone.
Time, please. Andy.
Sam, I think we would make a mistake if we now think we've got to apply a different strategy in Scotland than we do in England. I think the loss of support in both places has the same underlying cause, and that is when people have looked at us, they've not been able to see a party they can relate to anymore. They've seen a Westminster elite that doesn't look like it's in touch with their lives. And this is the thing that we have to get right. We have to start by answering that question, what is Labour for? My answer is to help everybody get on in life. That should be our answer. And what does that mean? It means a secure job for everybody. It means a decent home, a good standard of living. It means prospects for your kids at the end of school, university or an apprenticeship. It means proper care for your mum and dad. These are the things that matter in life, and Labour's got to speak to these simple things with powerful, resonant policies which show everybody how they can get those things. Those dreams are dying for people across the country. We have got to be the party that revives them, and that is what Labour will be under my leadership.
Thank you. Jeremy?
We obviously lost a huge amount of support in Scotland. We gained some support in England. Indeed, we put on 1 million votes in the general election in England. Why did we lose in Scotland? A combination of things. One was the anti-austerity message being offered by the SNP, even though their own economic strategy is, how should I put it, questionable. But we also lost, I think, because we got involved in the Better Together campaign jointly with the Tories rather than putting forward a simple, clear Labour tradition message in Scotland. Remember, Scotland, the home of Red Clydeside, Scotland, the home of the ILP, Scotland, the home of the founder of the Labour Party. There's a huge radical tradition there we could have used and should indeed be very proud of. The last point I'd make is this. We live in a society or a country that has changed dramatically. We have national governments in Wales and Scotland, we have a devolved administration in Northern Ireland, we have semi-devolution in London. I think we need to go a bit further and a bit more thoughtfully about this, and in opposition set up a constitutional convention to work out what we do for the future about identity, representational politics, and indeed the structure of our own party.
Thank you. And Liz?
Okay, I think what happened in Scotland happened over a long time, actually. We lost touch with too many people, we took voters for granted, and we didn't have a positive enough alternative for the future that everyone could feel part of. And I think that people in Watford, where I grew up, or Leicester, where I represent, or Edinburgh, or Dundee, or Glasgow, want the same things in life. They want a good job that pays a decent wage. They want a nice home to live in, decent public services, and to know that they'll have a good life when they retire. But, you know, I want to be clear about this. The SNP, they're not socialists. They are nationalists. They have raised national identity to being more important than anything, more important than what we have in common as human beings. And we in the Labour Party stand for solidarity, that we are stronger together than we are apart. And then there's been talk of having, you know, an independent Scottish Labour Party. That's not what I want. I want a united kingdom and a united Labour Party. We've got to have more devolution, but never forget that we are stronger together, and they are nationalists, not socialists.
Thank you. Next question, Jerry Metcalf from Cambridge, who's probably a teacher, I imagine. But where are you? Where are you, Jerry Metcalf?
And are you a teacher?
Are you here? Yes, you are.
Thank you. Jerry Metcalf from Cambridge, an almost retired forensic scientist.
Oh, well done. Diversity in action.
Assuming there's still to be a decision to be made in 2020, what are the contenders' views of maintaining or developing the extremely expensive white elephant of Trident?
And that's first to Andy. Oh, sorry.
Well, enjoy your retirement when it finally comes. I think the world we're in now is incredibly uncertain. I mean, the events we've seen in the first 15 years of this decade, who could possibly have predicted those events? in the 1990s. And in that context, I don't believe we as a country can take a step into the unknown and take a gamble, effectively, to get rid of the nuclear deterrent. So I'm not going to, give you an answer that you might like to hear. I would renew it in full. I think we do not know enough about how this century will unfold, the risks to our security. Of course, like anybody, I believe in multilateral disarmament, of course, and we must work harder at that. But as we are here today, I do not believe that that is a risk I would take. And as Prime Minister of this country, the safety of this country must always come first.
Thank you, Andy. And can we have Jeremy next, please?
Thanks very much for your question. Last month I was in New York for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference. The 5 declared nuclear weapon states, Britain, France, Russia, China and the USA, all stood up and claimed they needed their weapons for their own security. 189 other countries stood up and said, we don't have nuclear weapons, we don't want them, we don't need them, they don't make us more secure. Who got the greatest applause at that conference? Abdul Minty, on behalf of South Africa, who said, we gave up our weapons to improve our security and spend our resources on something much more useful. I will absolutely oppose the replacement of the Trident nuclear missile system. I think nuclear weapons are immoral, dangerous and fundamentally wrong and don't bring any security either. They only make the world a more dangerous place. I attended the Humanitarian Effects of War conference. One nuclear explosion anywhere in the world would create an economic, food, social and climatic disaster for the whole planet. We have to get rid of our nuclear weapons as an example to the rest of the world. They don't bring us safety or security.
Thank you. Liz. You know what I'm going to say? Liz.
You won't be surprised to hear me say I don't agree with Jeremy on that. I support Trident renewal. Shame, some people say, and there will be big differences in our party on this, but I have to tell you how it is. I think we need to renew our continuous at-sea deterrent because of the risks that we face in the world that are changing more quickly. Who would have imagined what has happened with Russia, Ukraine, with ISIL, Iraq, Syria? We must protect our country. But I also believe if we want a world that is free of nuclear weapons, we must do that together. I have never been a unilateralist. I have been a multilateralist. Some of you won't like it, but I've got to tell you how it is.
Thank you very much. Can we remember the no heckling rule? Otherwise I'll call on the many teachers in the room to keep order. Yvette, please.
I've always been a multilateralist rather than a unilateralist. I would like to see us globally reduce our nuclear weapons, but I think we should do so as part of a negotiated process that we are part of, urging other countries to do so too. In the absence of that global disarmament, I think we should renew Trident. And I think so, although I know it's a difficult decision for many in our party, I think it is the right one for our country. And sometimes we just have to be really hard-headed about the defence of our country, about our international obligations and our international security. That is what I would do, because I think this is not just about saying sometimes what people want to hear in order to choose the Labour leader. It's also about being ready to be a Labour Prime Minister.
Thank you very much. And next question. Alex Mayer, are you with us?
Hello, Alex Mayer, South East Cambridgeshire Labour Party. What will you do to ensure that Britain remains part of a reformed EU?
And that question goes first to Jeremy.
Sorry?
And that question goes first to Jeremy.
We have to use the opportunity of the negotiations that are now taking place and starting to make Labour demands on Europe, on working conditions, on trade union rights, on environmental conditions, and particularly on trade relations and the arcane negotiations between the European Union and the United States on the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, which I think is a very, very dangerous agreement altogether that's being negotiated at the present time. We have to also stand up against the idea that you can stop the free movement of people around Europe but encourage the free movement of capital around Europe. People have a right to move, people have a right to travel, and I think this narrative of attacking everyone from Eastern Europe who comes here can of course be reversed. It could start attacking every British person that decides to go live in Spain or France or anywhere else. We have to be proud of the fact that we want international movements and international solidarity and decency all across the continent.
Thank you very much. Liz.
We have got to set out a big, bold, positive case for why we want to remain part of the European Union. We are an internationalist party. You know, our values have never stopped at our borders, and we understand that it is in our national interest to work with others to achieve our common goals. It's vital for jobs, it's vital for the social protections, it's vital for tackling the biggest issue of our times, which is climate change. It's essential to helping us trade with huge areas that are developing around the world. We need a distinctive Labour Yes campaign, and isn't it brilliant that Alan Johnson's going to be leading that for us? But it would be a mistake for us to somehow boycott the wider Yes campaign. We can rebuild links with businesses, which we need to do. We have to, you know, we can get support with our trade union colleagues, with the Green Movement, with young people. This is a massive opportunity for us to build the links on a common agenda, which we need to win again. We've got to go out early, positive and strong, and that's what I do as Labour leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Yvette.
Yeah, I think we should be arguing for reform in Europe before the referendum, during the referendum, and after the referendum. We should have a positive vision of Europe based around jobs and growth and support for employment rights all across Europe, and make that part of our campaign. But that's alongside our argument for being part of Europe in the first place. And we have two big arguments for being in Europe. The first is it was part of the grand project for peace across a continent, in a continent where, to be honest, we had countries threatening nuclear weapons against each other less than a generation ago. And also the jobs and the investment that we have at stake. In my constituency, we have a new Haribo factory that is being built, 600 jobs, in order for them to export to Ireland, to France, to Spain. And the management say they would be worried about that investment if we were out of Europe. And I think we've got to make our campaign really local in the arguments we make. Let's have more Haribos. Really, let's have more Haribos. And let's talk about more of the local Haribo factory examples, so we can give every local area. We know the pressures that are going to be on us in terms of the arguments we will have to make with UKIP and so on. So that's why every single area needs to have a Haribo to champion as to why it's in our interest to stay an international party and part of Europe.
Thank you very much, Andy.
I think a policy of free Haribos for all would win the referendum hands down. I think we would be walking to victory. To answer your question, be proud of who we are, pro-European party number one. And then next, get off the back foot and on the front foot and show leadership. That is what I have done in this campaign. I was the first in our party to call for a separate Labour Yes campaign so that we can make a distinctive Labour case. Let's not let happen to us what happened in Scotland. Let's learn those lessons, because if we don't get our act together, we might face a real challenge if we're seen as being part of a cosy Westminster club, arguing for the status quo with UKIP outside of that. So that's why I said that. We do need to see reform on the free movement rules so that freedom to work does not mean freedom to claim. We have to address that if we're to go to the heart of people's concerns. And we also have to stop the undercutting of jobs and wages. But let's get into this argument with a wholehearted approach. Let's be proud of being pro-European. Let's make that case, you know, because the Tories are already falling apart around us. And if we're strong and if we make the argument, that is the route to winning in 2020. A strong, confident Labour Party standing up for what it believes in.
Thank you. And I think this is going to have to be the final question given the time, but Andy Mackenzie in St Albans, are you here? You are, fantastic. A microphone is coming your way.
Hi, I'm not a teacher, I'm a postman. So do the candidates believe that the party has become disconnected from working class voters? If so, how would they re-establish this connection?
And that goes first to Liz.
Yes, I do. I think one of the mistakes that we made in the last government was we were, I believe, too cavalier about the consequences of globalisation. You know, it opened up huge opportunities for some people and left far too many behind. I represent a predominantly working class seat in Leicester, and I've seen the real anger and concern myself for people who, you know, they've lost their jobs from the textile industries in years gone by. The new jobs are there that aren't paying the decent salary and wages that they want and need. So we have to change that. We have to be a party that speaks for working people, that understands that we need to really radically reform our economy so it isn't so dependent on the South, that we have jobs and growth in every part of the community, and we've got to have more people from ordinary backgrounds becoming MPs. I mean, when you go through a selection process to be a candidate, it's 13 weeks now. If you're a teacher or a care worker or a shift worker, how can you possibly afford to do that? We've got to open that up in a party and make sure we have the policies we need to give people a chance for the future.
Yvette.
Yes, Andy, I do. I think we've got to recognise that people, particularly in the low-skilled jobs, low-paid jobs, are falling further and further behind. We've seen widening inequalities across the country, particularly across the labour market. And also, you know, something's got to be done about that. So it's why we were right to talk in the election about dealing with some of the zero-hours contracts, the exploitative zero-hours contracts. We've got to carry on doing that. But we've also got to say, well, where are the new jobs going to come from? Where are the higher-paid jobs going to come from? Where are the vocational skills going to come from? The apprenticeships going to come from? To get those jobs and those job opportunities and the ambitions and the aspirations for working-class families to be able to get on in life for their future too. And also recognise that actually for a lot of people in low-paid work, they've also got really worried, particularly we've seen it in some of our coastal towns in the eastern region, with the impact of employers or agencies exploiting immigration to also undercut low pay and jobs as well. And that's why we have to tackle that kind of exploitation, the agencies that we're only recruiting from abroad, and the exploitation in the labour market, make that exploitation a crime so that we can stand up for all of our communities.
Thank you. Andy.
I think you put your finger on the thing that worries me most. I think there's been some in our party for a long time who said, you've got to chase, quotes, aspirational voters over here, as if working class people don't have aspiration and only speak to some voters. Labour wins when it speaks for everybody. And the trouble is, there are some voters who think we don't understand what their lives are like, that we will on the doorstep avoid their eyes if they start talking about immigration or their concerns about benefits. We've got to have Labour answers to these things. But more than that, we've got to answer the bigger worries that they have. You know, when we talked about home ownership at the beginning, it is working class people who've lost the dream of home ownership. We've got to be the party that gives that back to them. And it is working class people who worry about where their kids will work, because we have a school system that's focused on the university route and doesn't give kids who want a technical education the same ambitions. I want to expand student finance to cover kids on the apprenticeship route, so they've got the same ambition at school as kids on the university route. These things would mean something to working class families up and down the country. We should be the party of working class aspiration, to use that word, and that is where we win again. Not when we choose one group of voters above another, but when Labour speaks for everyone.
Thank you very much. And Jeremy.
This party was founded as an aspiration of the organised working class. The idea that you could get into Parliament groups of MPs who could represent trade unionists and ordinary workers all over the country. There are still 6 million people who are members of trade unions. Many young people are joining unions for the first time who've not had a family tradition of being the unions because of the period since Margaret Thatcher. We need to be proud of our links with the trade unions, not treat them as an embarrassing uncle that we don't like to talk about except when we meet them at Christmas time. Secondly, we need to, and I agree with Andy on this point, look at the issue of aspirations, look at the issue of discrimination, and look at the way in which our school system works. Why is it so much easier for students from private education to get into good universities than it is from those from state comprehensive schools? That's got to stop. Why is it that there is so much discrimination against working class people, against people with different accents in trying to get jobs, in trying to move on the way through? Why is there a looking down on vocational qualifications and the skills that go with it? As a society, we rely on professors, philosophers, lawyers. We also rely on plumbers, electricians, and road sweepers and postal deliverers. Let's bring a cohesion to our lives and respect to our lives in that.
Thank you very much. You're allowed to clap at the end, it's all right. And we now have time for each of the candidates to make a 2-minute personal statement to you, starting with Jeremy. and going down the line. So Jeremy first, please.
And we're instructed to use the lectern, and that way, oh, there is a clock here. I thought we were going to avoid the clock being up here.
No. Never avoid the clock.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting us to this hustings this morning here in Stevenage. It's absolutely brilliant. And the whole radical tradition of East Anglia and what goes with it has got to be understood. I'll be at Burston later in the year, and also that whole tradition of organised farm workers and those people that stood up against injustice and stood up for a different life. And I think we should always be proud of the traditions we come from as a party. I've been very privileged for the last 32 years to represent my constituency, Islington North, in Parliament. I love doing it. My job is to represent the people, but it's also to take up causes and represent other issues as well. Peace, international human rights, justice, anti-poverty campaigns in our own society. As a party, I've been in the party since the age of 16. I love the party. I sometimes get very angry with the party. Sometimes I don't quite hate the party, but I disagree with it. And sometimes the party disagrees with me. But that's life. That's okay. But I think sometimes we lose our way. We've made fantastic achievements. The National Health Service, the Welfare State, Council Housing, the Equality Act, the Human Rights Act. We've made fantastic achievements. But too often, we've been a bit frightened of powerful commercial interests. We've been a bit frightened of the USA and its military interests. We sometimes have, I think, slightly lost our way. And so in this period, when there is a systemic increase in inequality in our society, a systemic increase in discrimination against the poorest, by cuts in public expenditure, by excessive profit taking, by tax havens all over the place, let's say it like it is, that austerity is brought about by the banking crisis, created, as my colleagues have said, on Wall Street, not anywhere else. And who's paying for it? The poorest in Britain, the poorest all across Europe, and the people of Greece are paying for it the hardest and the harshest at the present time. Let's be proud of putting forward an economic strategy that is about redistribution of wealth, that is about eliminating poverty, that is about giving everybody real opportunities in life. Thank you.
Friends, I believe we could have won the last election, and my message to you today is we will win in 2020, but only if we change. The painful truth is we lost the election because we lost touch with too much of the country. People didn't trust us on the economy or with their taxes, and we didn't set out a compelling vision of a better life that everyone could feel part of. And the scale of the defeat means this is not the time for safety first or for turning back to what's comfortable or familiar, because if we stick with the politics of the last election, we will lose the next. We must face this challenge head on and make a fresh start. Now, my politics are inseparable from the party and the country I love. I believe in wealth creation, because without a dynamic economy in every part of the country, we won't get the decent jobs and public services people need. I believe in responsibility from the top to the bottom, because making a contribution and playing by the rules is the bedrock of a decent society. And I stand for strong public finances, because without that, we can't make the changes we all want to see. I want to be Labour's first woman leader and Prime Minister, because I believe your chance of fulfilling your potential should never depend on where you're born, what your parents did, your gender, sexuality, or the colour of your skin. That is how we create a strong economy and fairer society where everyone succeeds. We've got to work with our schools, colleges, businesses and unions to create the opportunities and jobs of the future. We must be a confident, outward-looking country that engages with the rest of the world. And we've got to get power out of Westminster, down into the cities, towns and counties that will lead our national renewal. We can win again when we change, when we put our values into practice. I will not always say what's comfortable for this party, but I will say what I believe is right. I think I'm the fresh start Labour needs to change our party, win in 2020, and change the country.
Thank you.
On polling day, we were knocking up. I was stopped by a woman who had arrears on the bedroom tax, and she was in tears when she told me about it. And I urged her to go and vote, and she did. She voted Labour, she voted for us, but we lost. And I feel like we let her down. We cannot do that again. We have to win in 2020. And in 8 weeks' time, you're going to vote for the next leader of the Labour Party. Make sure it is someone you are confident can be a Labour Prime Minister. Because that's what it's going to need. Someone strong enough to change our party so that we can change the country. Strong enough to take on the Tories from day one. And also strong enough to stand up for Labour values, but also with the experience and the fresh ideas for the future from 2020 and beyond to make sure that we have that vision that can hold our whole party and reach out to the whole country as well. Because in the end, that's what's going to matter. Reaching out to the areas where we need to win back votes from the Tories, from the SNP, from UKIP, from the Greens. I was born in Scotland, brought up in England. My family are all from the northern coalfields where I now represent, but I was a comprehensive girl in Hampshire. My first job was driving a tractor on a farm, and my kids now go to school in the big city and one of the most dynamic cities in the world. And I love the diversity of our country, but I think it needs to be a source of strength that holds us together, not that pulls us apart. And I'm standing not because I want to be something, but because I want to do something. Because opposition sucks. And I want to work with business to create the new high-tech jobs of the future. As a working mum, I want to make sure all of our kids get the very best start in life, that we can have a stronger economy and a fairer society. And I know that I've had so many more chances in life than my mum and my grandma because of Labour's campaign for women's equality. The Tories are turning the clock back. We know David Cameron has a woman problem. Let's give him an even bigger one. Let's elect our first woman leader.
I am running a campaign not just to win this contest. I am running a campaign to win for Labour in 2020. Because I bet, like me, you're sick of losing. I certainly am. We don't want to be there again. If we're going to win, though, we do have to face up to the hardest truth of all, and that is that millions have lost their emotional contact with us. How many times did you hear on the doorsteps, oh, my mum and dad did, and my gran and granddad didn't, they'd never forgive me, but you know, I'm just not there this time. It's not just here in Stevenage that I heard that. I heard it in the Midlands, in the North, obviously in Scotland as well. That has got to change, and that is the change that I can offer. I will take Labour out of the Westminster bubble. I will be a leader whose voice will carry into all the nations and regions of this country. I will face up to the difficult issues on the economy and immigration, but I will develop Labour solutions. Why? Because I am Labour through and through. And do you know what? I'll do something else as well. I will give this party its pride back. It is time to stop beating ourselves up. It is time to get up off the floor. This party has better values than any other. This party has better people than any other. People who put others first before themselves. This is what we are about. This is why we are Labour. This is who we are. We should be proud of what we've achieved. I'm proud of where we're going. And I want you to help me develop a Labour agenda for the 21st century, a comprehensive education system that gives every child hope at the end of school, plans for home ownership that keep that dream alive for everyone in our country, a national health and care service that means we support people with dementia as well as we treat cancer. That is a Labour vision for the 21st century. This is how I will put the heart and soul back into the Labour Party. This is how we win. I ask you, if you believe in what I'm saying, I ask you now to be part of it, this renewal that our Labour Party needs so that we go forward from here and we win at the next general election. Thank you very much.